All right, let's jump straight into it. Today, in this explainer, we're diving into a deeply dark, incredibly cinematic mystery of the high seas. We're talking about a terrifying ghost ship legend that has literally haunted maritime history for decades. Now, I want you to close your eyes for just a second and picture the Strait of Malacca in the late 1940s. It's this narrow, super heavily trafficked stretch of water right between Malaysia and Indonesia. But on one perfectly clear, otherwise calm day, something profoundly unnatural was drifting through those waters. We're going to completely unpack the legend of the Ourang Medan today. We'll break down the visceral horror of its discovery, dig into the actual science behind the theories, and follow an investigative trail that asks the ultimate question: did this nightmare vessel ever truly exist at all?
Picture this. You're a radio operator in the late 1940s. It's an incredibly isolating job. You're sitting in this cramped, dimly lit room just scanning the frequencies when out of nowhere, you pick up this absolutely terrifying, disjointed Morse code broadcast echoing across the open ocean. It translates to SOS from Ourang Medan. We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole of crew dead. I die. I mean, wow. Morse code was the reliable backbone of sea communication back then, right? It cut through fog and distance where normal voices would just fade away. To receive a pattern of dots and dashes, spelling out such specific apocalyptic doom, followed by those two haunting final words, and then just absolute silence, it's literally the ultimate maritime nightmare. It's kind of like getting a frantic text from a friend saying someone is in their house, and then their phone just completely dies. So the doomed vessel broadcasting this total nightmare was supposedly a Dutch freighter, just wandering that heavily trafficked Strait of Malacca. The name Ourang Medan roughly translates to Man of Medan. This gave the ship a really distinct regional identity, placing it right in the heart of the Dutch East Indies. And to put that into perspective, this area was a highly volatile hotspot of shifting powers right after World War II. It was essentially a chaotic geopolitical Wild West, so a vessel operating in the shadows, well, that wouldn't exactly be out of the ordinary. Okay, let's trace exactly how this went down, because the events escalated from a desperate distress call to a massive explosion that conveniently erased all the physical evidence. An American merchant ship called the Silver Star intercepted that horrific SOS and immediately changed course. Now, from the outside, the Ourang Medan looked perfectly fine. Seriously, there was no smoke, no gaping holes in the hull, but the second the rescue crew actually boarded, they were met with an atmosphere that was unnaturally cold and just completely silent. And their rescue mission was cut very short when this sudden, totally unexplained fire broke out deep in the cargo hold. They had to evacuate immediately right before the entire ship violently exploded and swallowed the whole mystery straight into the depths of the ocean. But right before that explosion happened, the crew of the Silver Star witnessed something that completely defies logic. When they boarded, they didn't just find an empty ship. They walked into this eerily silent, photorealistic nightmare. The entire crew was dead, literally frozen in pure terror. Their corpses were sprawled on their backs, eyes wide open, staring straight up at the sun with their mouths gaping open. Even the ship's dog was found dead, teeth bared in a snarl, like it was facing down some invisible demon. And here's the craziest part. There wasn't a single drop of blood anywhere. No bullet wounds, no signs of a struggle, nothing. It was as if someone hit pause at the exact millisecond of a movie jump scare, and everyone just froze and died in that exact posture. This incredibly visceral scene forces us to ask a really profound investigative question. I mean, we have a ship full of hardened sailors, guys who are totally used to the extreme dangers of the sea, and they are all simultaneously terrified to death by something that leaves absolutely zero physical trace. So, what does this all mean? To figure this out, we really have to put on our detective hats and look at the actual science of that era. When investigators analyze the science behind these deaths, they generally split the plausible suspects into two main camps: a mundane accident or a deeply sinister payload. First up, let's look at carbon monoxide poisoning from a boiler malfunction. CO is a colorless, odorless gas, right? So a smoldering fire down below could have slowly suffocated the crew. But here's the major problem with that theory. Carbon monoxide poisoning acts a lot like a heavy sedative. It basically makes you drift off to sleep. It definitely doesn't cause you to die flat on your back, eyes wide open, in agonizing, wide-awake terror. And that logical gap leads us straight into the much more sinister and, frankly, way more plausible theory: illegal hazardous cargo. This brings us to a really fascinating idea. What if the ship was essentially a burner phone of the sea?
an unregistered vessel secretly transporting illegal, highly lethal wartime chemicals. You gotta remember, right after World War II, the world was absolutely flooded with surplus weapons and horrific, unaccounted-for chemicals. Some experts theorize the ship was carrying leftover nerve agents like taboon, or perhaps even biological horrors tied to Unit 731, which was the infamous Japanese military division. But the most widely accepted chemical culprits for this specific event? A highly deadly, highly unstable combination of poorly stored potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin. If you think about it, the ship's cargo hold was basically a floating chemical time bomb just waiting for a leaky roof. It's like a giant, terrible domino effect. Here is the step-by-step reaction that perfectly explains both the asphyxiation of the crew and the destruction of the ship. Step 1. Rough seas cause salt water to breach the hull. Step 2. That water mixes with the unsecured potassium cyanide. This reaction creates an invisible tidal wave of toxic gas that rapidly vents up through the entire ship. This completely explains the crew's agonizing death and those frozen, terrifying expressions as their lungs simply seized up. Finally, the seawater keeps rising until it reaches the highly unstable nitroglycerin, which triggers the massive explosion that forced the Silver Star away and conveniently sank all the evidence. But here is where our entire true crime investigation hits a massive, impenetrable brick wall. Despite this incredibly detailed, cinematic story, searching for the vessel in the definitive global shipping registry yields absolutely nothing. Think of Lloyd's Register of Shipping as the global DMV and birth certificate archive for all maritime vessels. If a merchant ship of that size existed, it literally has to be in there. But the Ourang Medan? It's a total ghost in the archives. There is no registration in the Netherlands, no port of origin, and strangely enough, there isn't even an official log from the Silver Star corroborating the rescue ever took place. This total lack of a paper trail creates a huge fork in our investigation. Are we looking at a masterful, highly coordinated post-World War II government cover-up, or just a really brilliant hoax? Think about it. If the ship was actually carrying illegal nerve gas or Unit 731 materials, governments would have every reason in the world to completely scrub its existence from the books. But on the flip side, what if the lack of records isn't proof of a cover-up at all? What if it's just proof of a pure fiction? Well, thanks to some incredible internet sleuths like Estelle Hargraves, we can actually track the real origin of the story, and honestly, it completely blows the established narrative right out of the water. The event supposedly happened in 1947 or 1948, right? Yet articles about the Ourang Medan were actually published in British and Italian newspapers in 1940, that is, 7 full years before the ship supposedly sank. A freelance Italian journalist named Silvio Scherli wrote about it in Trieste, Italy back in 1940. The story kind of went quiet during the war, only for Scherli to revive it in Dutch newspapers in 1948, presenting it to readers as a brand new recent event. It even eventually tricked a U.S. Coast Guard magazine into printing it in 1952. No way, right? As you'll see when we compare the original 1940 newspaper clippings to the later 1948 iterations, the narrative clearly mutated. It grew, it changed, it became way more terrifying. In the 1940 version, it was set near the Solomon Islands and involved a British warship. But jumped to 1948, and suddenly the setting shifted to the Strait of Malacca, the rescuers became the American Silver Star, and out of nowhere we have these incredibly vivid, macabre details of the dead dog and the frozen, sun-staring faces. It's exactly like watching a movie script go through endless rewrites just to make it punchier and scarier for our brand new audience. Impartially speaking, looking at the evidence, historians strongly suspect that our freelance Italian journalist, Silvio Scherli, manufactured the whole tale. He was just capitalizing on the public's real thirst for dark, unbelievable mysteries. As historian Michael East points out, Scherli was likely just a hustler looking to turn a profit. He saw a highly compelling narrative, a mysterious ghost ship, and he adapted it. He filled in the gaps with his own incredibly entertaining embellishments just to sell more papers. He took a tiny kernel of maritime dread and spun it into a literal masterpiece of nautical folklore. But, why do we still care today? Why are we still talking about it? Even if it is a complete fabrication, the Ourang Medan survives because it perfectly encapsulates our darkest anxieties. It taps right into that primal fear we all have of the deep, isolated ocean. It's the ultimate locked room mystery where there is nowhere to run. Plus, it perfectly captured the very real post-WW2 paranoia about what horrific chemical weapons might just be floating around out there, totally unaccounted for. And because the ship so conveniently exploded in the story, you can never truly find the wreck to 100% disprove it. It's a story perfectly engineered to terrify us, and it even inspires modern media today, like the hit video game Man of Medan.
To wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder the next time you look out over the dark, vast expanse of the ocean. Whether the Ourang Medan was a real ship tragically erased by a catastrophic chemical cover-up, or if it was just an evolving ghost story engineered by a super cunning journalist, it reveals something really profound about us. We are so drawn to the abyss. We desperately want to believe that out there in the uncharted depths, there are still terrifying mysteries that defy all human logic. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.